Hello everyone. This is the second part of the history of the Second World War. By the spring of 1945, the war in Europe was reaching its climax. Allied forces were pushing relentlessly toward the heart of Germany. Cities fell, defensive lines collapsed, and the front moved faster than ever before. For the Ghost Army, this new phase of the war meant something entirely different. Deception would now take place deep inside enemy territory, no longer operating safely behind friendly lines. Ghost Army units followed advancing Allied divisions into freshly captured zones. These areas were unstable, dangerous, and often still contested. German patrols, snipers, and artillery remained active. Any mistake could lead to direct combat, something the Ghost Army was never meant to face. Yet their mission had become more critical than ever. German commanders, desperate and uncertain, were clinging to any intelligence that could help them predict Allied movements. The Ghost Army's task was to exploit that desperation, to create illusions of overwhelming force that would paralyze decision-making at the highest levels. Entire Phantom divisions were now deployed in regions bordering Germany itself. Inflatable tanks were positioned along key roads and river crossings. Fake headquarters appeared near towns and forests, complete with antennas, supply dumps, and command vehicles. From the air, everything looked real. From intercepted radio traffic, it sounded real. To German intelligence, the threat appeared massive and immediate. Sound trucks once again played their role, broadcasting the rumble of armor and the movement of troops across wide areas. At night, the landscape seemed alive with activity. Forests echoed with engines. Villages trembled with the illusion of advancing columns. German listening posts reported large-scale troop movements, often exaggerating their size in fear-driven reports. Radio deception became even more sophisticated. Operators mimicked elite units, adjusting transmission styles to match specific commanders and formations. Messages described preparations for crossings, redeployments, and imminent attacks. Each broadcast was carefully timed to match the visual and sound deception unfolding on the ground. But the margin for error was shrinking. German forces were closer, more alert, and increasingly aggressive. Patrols pushed forward to verify reports. Artillery fire tested suspected assembly areas. In some cases, shells landed dangerously close to inflatable equipment. The illusion held, but barely. The men of the Ghost Army worked under constant pressure. Equipment was deployed and dismantled at record speed. Positions were abandoned just hours before German probes arrived. Sleep was scarce. Fear was constant. Yet the deception continued. The success of these operations was measured not in explosions, but in silence. German units hesitated. Counterattacks were delayed. Reinforcements were sent to the wrong locations. Allied advances encountered less resistance, moving faster and with fewer casualties. The Ghost Army had crossed a threshold. They were no longer just shaping perception. They were shaping the final movements of the war itself. Every false division created a vacuum elsewhere. Every illusion saved lives. As the Allies prepared for the last push into Germany, deception became inseparable from victory. The battlefield was no longer defined solely by tanks and infantry, but by information, fear, and belief. And the Ghost Army stood at the center of it all, unseen, uncredited, and operating closer to danger than ever before. The final act of their secret war had begun. As the war in Europe entered its final weeks, the Ghost Army faced its most dangerous mission yet. Germany was collapsing, but its forces were far from defeated. Isolated units, fanatical defenders, and desperate commanders fought with nothing left to lose. In this chaos, deception became both more powerful and more perilous than ever before. The Ghost Army was tasked with creating the illusion of massive Allied forces, poised for decisive strikes. These final deceptions were designed to pin down German units, prevent counterattacks, and keep enemy commanders guessing until the very end. Every operation carried the weight of the entire campaign. Inflatable tanks and vehicles were deployed at unprecedented speed. Entire fake divisions appeared overnight, then vanished just as quickly. The equipment was often placed dangerously close to enemy positions. In some cases, German artillery opened fire based on false intelligence, shelling empty fields and forests where only illusions stood. Sound trucks pushed the limits of their range. Recorded noises of heavy armor, troop movements, and construction activity echoed across contested regions. German reports spoke of reinforcements arriving, bridges being prepared, and large formations gathering for assaults that would never come. Radio deception reached its highest level of sophistication. Operators transmitted complex message traffic, simulating coordination between corps and divisions. Fake orders, supply requests, and movement reports flooded German interception networks. Analysts struggled to separate truth from fiction. Faced with overwhelming data, they erred on the side of caution, but the enemy was learning. German patrols moved aggressively to verify intelligence. Reconnaissance units probed suspected assembly areas. In several instances, Ghost Army soldiers narrowly avoided direct contact, abandoning equipment moments before discovery. The line between illusion and reality was razor thin. Fear became a constant companion. Unlike frontline troops, the Ghost Army could not fight their way out of trouble. Their survival depended entirely on remaining unseen and unchallenged. Every sound, every shadow carried risk. Yet, discipline and training held the units together under pressure. Despite the danger, the results were undeniable. German units remained fixed in place, guarding against threats that did not exist. Counterattacks were delayed or canceled entirely. Allied forces advanced with reduced resistance, exploiting gaps created by deception. As the war drew closer to its end, the Ghost Army's role reached its peak. They were no longer supporting operations. They were shaping the final collapse of enemy resistance. Their illusions bought time, space, and lives during the most critical moments of the campaign. When Germany finally surrendered, the Ghost Army quietly stood down. Their equipment was packed away. Their missions were erased from public record. The war ended, but their story did not begin. For decades, the Ghost Army remained a secret. Their operations were classified. Their achievements went unrecognized. The men returned home carrying memories they could not share, victories that would never be publicly claimed. Yet their legacy endured in silence. They had proven that wars could be won not only with force, but with imagination, discipline, and psychological insight. They turned deception into a strategic weapon, one that helped bring the deadliest conflict in human history to an end. The Ghost Army disappeared once more, this time into history itself. When the war ended in May 1945, celebrations swept across Europe and the United States. Cities erupted in relief. Soldiers returned home. The world began the long process of rebuilding. But for the men of the Ghost Army, there was no victory parade, no public recognition, and no stories to tell. Their war ended in silence. Orders were issued. Equipment was dismantled. Records were sealed. Every operation, every deception, every success was classified. The Ghost Army officially ceased to exist, and its members were instructed to never speak of what they had done. Not to friends, not to family, not even to fellow veterans. They returned home carrying secrets that would remain locked away for decades. Many of these soldiers resumed civilian lives as artists, designers, architects, and engineers. Some would later become famous, painters whose work hung in museums, fashion designers whose names appeared on runways, photographers whose images shaped post-war culture. Yet none of them could publicly connect their creative talents to the invisible battles they had fought. History moved on. Books were written about tank battles, generals, and invasions. Maps showed arrows and front lines. But the Ghost Army was missing from nearly every account. Their influence remained hidden between the lines of history. It was not until the 1990s that the truth began to emerge. As classified documents were slowly declassified, historians uncovered references to strange units, phantom divisions, and unexplained enemy movements. Veterans, now elderly, were finally allowed to speak. What they revealed astonished the world. The Ghost Army had conducted more than 20 major deception operations across Europe. Their illusions had misdirected entire German divisions. Their work had directly contributed to major Allied successes, including operations following D-Day and the final push into Germany. Historians estimate that their deception saved tens of thousands of Allied lives. What made their story even more remarkable was how modern it felt. The Ghost Army had pioneered techniques that would later become standard in psychological operations, information warfare, and strategic deception. Long before the digital age, they understood how perception could shape reality. In 2013, nearly 70 years after the war ended, the Ghost Army finally received official recognition. The United States Congress awarded them the Congressional Gold Medal, one of the nation's highest honors. Many of the original members were no longer alive to see it. Those who remained stood quietly, representing comrades who had taken their secrets to the grave. Their legacy is not found on monuments or battlefields. It exists in ideas, in the understanding that wars are fought not only with weapons, but with information, belief, and imagination. The Ghost Army proved that creativity could be a weapon, that art could deceive armies, that sound, shadow, and suggestion could change the course of history. They were never meant to be seen. They were never meant to be remembered. And yet, their invisible war helped bring the deadliest conflict in human history to an end. The army that never existed left a very real mark on the world. The end of World War II did not end the influence of the Ghost Army. Long after the gunfire faded and the front lines disappeared, the lessons learned from deception continued to shape the modern world of warfare, quietly, invisibly, and profoundly. What the Ghost Army proved was revolutionary. Reality on the battlefield is not only what exists, but what the enemy believes exists. This concept would echo through decades of military planning, intelligence strategy, and psychological operations. The Ghost Army had laid the foundation for a new kind of conflict, one where perception could outweigh firepower. During the Cold War, nations invested heavily in deception. Dummy missile silos, fake airfields, and simulated troop movements became standard practice. Radio deception evolved into electronic warfare. Visual illusions transformed into radar spoofing and satellite manipulation. The DNA of these strategies could be traced directly back to the experiments of the Ghost Army. But the legacy extended far beyond the military. The men who once created fake armies returned to civilian life, carrying a unique understanding of illusion and belief. Many of them reshaped post-war culture. They applied wartime lessons to advertising, architecture, industrial design, photography, and fine art. They understood how the human mind fills in gaps, how suggestion guides interpretation, how stories shape perception. In many ways, the Ghost Army anticipated the modern information age. Today's world is defined by narratives, images, and signals. Digital misinformation, psychological influence campaigns, and virtual realities operate on the same principles once tested with inflatable tanks and sound trucks. The battlefield has expanded from physical terrain to screens, networks, and collective consciousness. This makes the Ghost Army's story more relevant than ever. Their operations raise uncomfortable questions. If perception can be manipulated so effectively, where does truth begin and end? If an army can be created out of sound and shadow, how many other realities are constructed around us without notice? The Ghost Army succeeded not because the enemy was foolish, but because the human brain seeks patterns and meaning, even when they are false. There is also a moral weight to their success. Deception saved lives. It shortened battles. It reduced bloodshed. Yet it relied on lies, fear, and manipulation. The Ghost Army existed in the gray zone between necessity and illusion, where ethics are shaped by survival. For decades, their silence protected the integrity of future operations. Revealing too much too soon would have weakened the power of deception itself. Only when the techniques became widespread and evolved did the truth finally emerge. And when it did, it forced historians to reconsider how wars are won. Not every victory is visible. Not every hero fires a weapon. Some wars are fought in the mind, and some are won before the enemy even realizes. A battle has begun. The Ghost Army was never meant to leave behind ruins or monuments. Their battlefield was belief. Their weapon was imagination. Their victory was confusion. They remind us that history is shaped not only by those who fight openly, but by those who operate in the shadows, shaping events without ever stepping into the spotlight. As long as humans can be influenced by what they see, hear, and believe, the Ghost Army will never truly disappear. Their war is over, but their legacy is still being fought. In the end, the Ghost Army did not conquer territory, capture cities, or raise flags over enemy strongholds. Their victories were quieter, measured in hesitation, confusion, and choices made under false assumptions. Yet those invisible victories reshaped the outcome of World War II in ways that are still being uncovered today. What makes the Ghost Army extraordinary is not just what they did, but how they did it. They turned creativity into strategy. They transformed art into a weapon. Inflatable tanks, recorded sounds, and carefully crafted radio messages became tools as powerful as artillery. They proved that belief itself could be engineered. Their success relied on a deep understanding of human psychology. Enemy commanders did not see what was real. They saw what they expected to see. The Ghost Army fed those expectations with precision. They understood that once an idea takes hold in the mind, it becomes difficult to question, especially in moments of fear and uncertainty. This was warfare at its most subtle. No explosions announced their presence. No battle reports credited their efforts. Yet entire divisions moved, stopped, or waited because of them. Real soldiers lived because imaginary ones appeared in the right place at the right time. The Ghost Army also reminds us that history is often incomplete. What we think we know is shaped by what was recorded, celebrated, and remembered. For decades, This story remained hidden, not because it was unimportant, but because secrecy was its greatest strength. Only when silence was no longer necessary could the truth finally surface. Their story forces us to reconsider how wars are truly won. Power does not always come from force. Sometimes it comes from controlling information, shaping perception, and influencing decisions before the first shot is fired. The Ghost Army operated in this invisible space, where reality and illusion overlap. In today's world, these lessons feel strikingly familiar. We live surrounded by images, narratives, and signals competing for our attention. The methods have changed, but the principle remains the same. What we believe influences how we act. The Ghost Army understood this long before the digital age. They were pioneers of a new kind of warfare, one that continues to evolve. Their legacy lives on in modern psychological operations, strategic communication, and information warfare. The battlefield has expanded, but the fundamentals remain unchanged. The Ghost Army never sought recognition. They accepted anonymity as part of the mission, and yet their impact was profound. They helped shorten the war. They saved lives. They changed how conflicts would be fought forever. The army that never existed left behind one undeniable truth. Sometimes the most powerful force is the one your enemy believes is real. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video. We'll be waiting for you here on the channel with even more fascinating, mysterious, and untold stories from history.